Hey everyone, it's Marist. Welcome back to the Fool Me Once podcast.
What's up, y'all? It's Andrew.
I am so excited about today's episode. We are talking about one of my favorite subjects in the realm of communication skills and how to improve them. And today's episode is all around emotional intelligence and how to master expressing your emotions in a way that's healthy and constructive and productive, and just where you're able to truly learn how to speak your truth without having to worry about what other people are thinking or how they're receiving you, to feel confident in doing that, and also how to do it in a delicate way that's still respectful to the other person that you're communicating with.
Yeah, that's so good and well said. I am super pumped for this episode. This has been something I've been working on probably in the last 6 months or so, more intently, and I just feel like I have a lot of good things to share that speak to this specifically if you're kind of starting where I was at square one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like earlier this year, Andrew really took this seriously. Like it was one of his biggest internal struggles that he had, that he was so stuck in his head all the time that he didn't know how to talk, didn't know how to express. He knew how to talk.
This guy couldn't talk.
But didn't know how to talk in certain environments that challenged him to be more vulnerable with how it was that he was feeling. So whether that was in our personal dynamic and relationship, or friendships, or definitely around like more masculine dominant style, masculine energy. And then just, you know, he overcame a lot of hurdles with finally expressing himself to his family and some things that he had been struggling with. And I'm just so proud of you. Like you've come so far in the last 6 months of just like practicing these things. And that's why I'm so excited about this episode, because I just feel like we like came into our dynamic and relationship on two opposite ends.
Yeah, that couldn't be more true.
Like we truly were just came from two different worlds when it came to having the confidence to speak how you feel.
Yeah, your family definitely knows how to express themselves, and mine not so much. So
yeah, your family I feel like is a little bit just more reserved in terms of, I just remember noticing that like growing up in a household, for me, like I knew where my parents stood on certain topics and what opinion they had about certain things in certain scenarios. And I remember kind of meeting Andrew's family and being like, oh, whoa, like this is a way different environment where people just never say what they're thinking. Yeah, or what they feel.
And I just grew up like that, thinking that was normal or safer. I think there's a fear of maybe backlash, how they express themselves, whether it's good or bad things, you know, and maybe they could feel judged or whatnot. So
yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah. Like whether it's good or bad, it's just kind of like, well, how do I say the thing that's just gonna not have any sort of reaction or response that could send ruffle feathers or like send this dynamic into a different spot? It's just like, what's like safe? That's kind of how I felt.
Yeah, that's definitely what I picked up on too. But I was admired by people like you that could express themselves. Like I do have feelings. They're just staying inside, and I can't get them out effectively. And it sounds silly, but the struggle is real for people like that. Yeah,
for sure. Like I can see that. And then I think on the flip side of that, you know, when you're so comfortable saying how you feel, how do you make sure that you're not just like bulldozing people, or
that's true,
you know, using that sort of confidence as a weapon, or dominating over other people to where you're not really respecting the people who are less confident. Because at the end of the day, what I've noticed just in dealing with people in dynamics is a lot of people who have naturally dominant personalities, and this is speaking to myself before I learned how to kind of like self-regulate myself, like it's really easy to then sort of assert that dominance over people who are more soft-spoken or more whatever. And that doesn't feel good to anyone, right? Like no one is going to feel good if you're kind of the more soft-spoken person and you have the more dominant personality overpowering you and you feel helpless and powerless to speak. And it also doesn't feel good for me when that was more or less I don't want to say that aspect was a learned behavior. I just would say the learned behavior for me was feeling so confident in saying how I felt that I had to understand later in life that it's actually a skill to learn how to properly exert your confidence when it comes to communicating, and that you have to be super mindful. So that plays into our emotional intelligence and why we're tying emotional intelligence to this episode, because that's where that comes into play, is being aware of like how to balance that out, especially when you're dealing with someone who it takes a little bit more for them to be able to open up or really be vulnerable, because vulnerability for people who don't wear their heart on their sleeves is terrifying.
Scary. Yeah, it's so scary.
It's terrifying. And I don't know, because I've never felt it, but I could empathize with that, right? And that's another emotional intelligence skill, is to be able to have empathy. And that's something I've learned over the years, honestly, in the hard way in some respects. And the other aspect has been me being put in my place by people who are more dominant and kind of learning from that. And so that's what we strive to do here on this podcast, is to share, not only valuable lessons from a broader conceptual place, but to tie in our own personal stories that you guys hopefully can relate to us in these different episodes and topics, and hopefully see yourselves and learn from it. So
yeah, that's what we're here to do.
Okay, Andrew, so let's talk about obstacle number 1. Let's dig into obstacle number 1. If you guys have been following along the first couple episodes, then you'll know every single episode we're going to talk about the general lesson of the episode and what it is that we're here to talk about, and then the common obstacles that you might face whenever you're going to accomplish this topic or face this general lesson or topic, and then the opportunities that come with that, so that hopefully by the end of the episode you understand why you even want to learn this lesson and why you would benefit from learning it. And then from there, we jump into the extended podcast episodes in our membership. So make sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, the link is in the description box below where you can plug into that, or just go ahead and sign up for the free one and get our videos and resources drip straight to your inbox whenever they go live. But those extended episodes have those tangible kind of step-by-step resources to help you overcome whatever the obstacles and lessons were for any given episode. So let's go into obstacle number 1.
Yeah, let's get into it.
What is obstacle number 1? I know we touched on it already, but what would you say is the biggest obstacle that people have when it comes to going into that moment of expressing their feelings?
So the first obstacle, I think, when you're going into this is being afraid how people are going to react to your emotions when you do get to the place of expressing them. I know that's something that I've identified with and felt, and that fear paralyzed me from even facing people and expressing
in different conversations.
In different conversations, yeah.
And I feel like even when it's positive, sometimes I notice that, like, you would struggle, like whether it's like in the beginning and really wanting to tell me how you felt about me, kind of just, it more or less feels like, oh, like Andrew hasn't had a ton of practice. Like, you haven't done this a ton before. Like, it's not comfortable or normal for you to, like, wear your heart on your sleeve. And that, I'm sure that's not normal for a lot of people. I think this is probably something a lot of people struggle with.
I think for men too, that's a thing too, that's taught. So. Yeah.
So I think, okay, so obstacle being afraid of how people are gonna perceive you. Do you feel like if you have a differing opinion, so when it's not something positive like a relationship, like what do you feel like are some of the fears that might pop up when you're afraid that your opinion is strong, if you do have a strong opinion and it's different from the person you're talking to? How did you used to handle that, and how do you handle that now?
I think I used to handle that by not bringing up my differing opinion, or like curbing how strong I did feel about it, and kind of minimizing like my strong opinion to, like we mentioned before, just play it safe to not get any backlash from that person, whether it's real or perceived. It felt real to me.
Yeah. I bet it did. Yeah, I feel like one of the things that we used to talk about a lot too was, especially when we would be in like going out with like our friends and there's like a bunch of other men there, and I would be like, oh, like why didn't you say anything when they were talking about this or this? Because Andrew feels very safe talking to me, so I know and can anticipate like what all of his thoughts are going to be when a certain topic gets brought up, especially in a group setting or something like that. And then I would be kind of like shocked that like he didn't say something, and I'm watching like our other guy friends like hitting it off back and forth. They're sharing their differing opinions back and forth, and Andrew just not saying anything. And then even when I would ask you about it later, you would be like, oh, well, like, I don't know, like, it didn't really matter, like, they didn't need it, and you kind of came off like you had, like, this chip on your shoulder, and I was like, Andrew, I feel like this is, like, your ego, like, protecting you from maybe you speaking up, and then just the intensity. Do you feel like that's it? Like, that would just feel like a spotlight was on you?
Yeah, and I think there was fear of being vulnerable in this space with people I wasn't as comfortable with. Like, when I'm comfortable with you create this safe environment, so I know there's no backlash or anything. But since I didn't have this like wealth of experience since I was a kid of expressing my emotions in front of different people, it's just there's your fear of these like uncharted waters on what could happen. And that took you pointing it out and doing some deep reflection to even realize that that's what was happening.
Yeah, because it's like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen by you saying how you feel? I mean, maybe something bad could happen, you know, like I'm not going to discount that, but most times, like, nothing really bad's going to come from that. But it's almost like when you are out of sync with yourself and who you are and what you stand for and what you believe and all of that. So that actually is going to bring me into obstacle number 2. If that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and say it. The lack of self-awareness.
Yes.
Because that's what I think is obstacle number 2. All of the obstacles will kind of tie together, I feel. But lack of self-awareness then holds you back from speaking your truth because you don't even know what that truth is. If you, I would imagine, are raised in a household where you're not having a lot of things that you can pull from and reference to say, oh, like my parents felt blah, blah, blah about this topic and they expressed it and then this was the outcome and everything was fine. And so if you don't know and can't tell like that everything's going to work out or everything's going to be fine, then there is that fear of the unknown. And most importantly, I think that when someone is not able to do that, it's because they're not necessarily sure. So you learned, I feel, in that environment, like, oh, well, maybe like it's just safer to not speak. Therefore, I don't even need to take the time to learn about how I feel about this because I already know I'm never gonna say what's on my mind because I don't want to ruffle feathers and I don't want to cause conflict and I never want to be seen as the person who created any sort of, you know, imbalance or whatever that looks like in any given scenario. You just don't want to, I guess, ruffle feathers. The only
that's a good way to put it. And you haven't laid down any proof that you've spoken your mind in the past and whether it was received good or bad, and then you learned from it. Instead, you take the approach of let's just play it safe because that didn't lead to anything too scary.
Yeah. So then I think that kind of like builds on, well, why do I even need to be that self-aware, even like pay attention to my own feelings? Because I'm not ever going to say how I feel and they're just going to live inside my body and live inside my head. And I think that is just all tied into suppressing and suppressing your feelings. And I don't think that unless you experience or you're taught or told how unhealthy that can be to kind of bottle up your feelings and bottle up your emotions, you don't really know how that can manifest in your health or,
so true,
you know, your mental health, your physical health, like all that kind of stuff. So that's definitely something I feel like we took a lot more intentional effort in looking at with you as you were making these lifestyle changes and what was leading you to all of your drinking before we went sober and leading you to not being passionate about working out anymore. And it was kind of you feeling lost, and you can speak to it yourself, but just lightly, like that suppressing all of that suppression of your feelings, then they had to get out somehow. And if they're not being spoken, then I feel like it comes out with vices. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I definitely feel that way. Because when you don't truly know yourself and your self-awareness of your emotions, and then have healthy outlets for communicating them, I think it does just manifest in different ways that are unhealthy, whether it be alcohol or just escaping in different ways.
Yeah, escapism. Yeah. That's what I was thinking of.
So that's what it definitely led to in me. But then through getting sober, you find healthier ways to address those emotions. And when you have a clear head and clear intentions, you can tackle those things way more effectively rather than running from them.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I think that's gold.
Yeah.
Gold.
You got it.
Like, not having that self-awareness just keeps you from being centered with yourself. And anytime you're kind of disconnected from your own body and your own mind and your own feelings, then you're going to be susceptible to just kind of floating into whatever bubble and whatever group of people and whatever mindset somebody else around you has that is more dominant. And that's a super risky and vulnerable place to be in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So kind of being more mindful of, well, how aware am I of my feelings? And how you can get there. We'll talk about tons of exercises that we did with Andrew in the extended around self-awareness and how to become more in tune with your own feelings and your own emotions. Let's look at our notes, because I want to go into obstacle number 3. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about self-awareness?
No, I think that kind of put a bow on everything I wanted to say, but I love the point about the escapism and then approaching it with a clear head. I think that was crucial for me kind of making that breakthrough.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. And you touched on obstacle number 3 a little bit earlier, but obstacle number 3 is kind of the societal norms and what's expected of us in terms of how we express our emotions and when we express them and how and why and when and all and where is like the appropriate way to do that, especially when it crosses over into professional environments, right? But even on a personal level, like you and I talk a lot about this in terms of masculine energy and men and like what's expected of them in terms of what comes off as being like weak versus strong, and how is that kind of shifted over time, and what would you say to that, kind of like what your viewpoint was or your example of being masculine in your household versus what you kind of understand it to be now?
I think in terms of how masculines convey their emotions, I was kind of given the examples just through my family, is you just don't really talk about them. Like it's weak to cry, or you just don't be like overly lovey-dovey. Like, I don't think you really got that. Yeah, you just kind of, like we talked about before, you stay in the middle. You don't get too out of whack. Or I also saw examples of when like anger and aggression then manifest and come out in an unhealthy way. In a super dominant way. Right. Like asserting like masculine dominance. Whereas if you had a healthy outlet for your emotions, that wouldn't happen. You would just communicate them healthily. And I've noticed like, so that kind of kept you from just like having really speaking anything at all. Mm-hmm. But then what I've noticed now is like you honor those emotions more. Like you're okay with the times that you're frustrated or you're sad or you're happy or you're super lovey-dovey. Like you have a broader range of emotions that I feel like you show outwardly now. And you've learned sort of those tools for self-regulating by like going and walking outside, or, you know, going on a walk if you're frustrated and then coming back and cooling and calming down. Yeah. Instead of just letting things bottle up and then letting them out in an unhealthy way. Yeah. And then for me, it's kind of like the whole idea around, from a professional perspective, it's been more prominent to me, like societal norms of, you know, the customer is always right, or you have to do whatever it takes to like quote unquote preserve your reputation. And I've never bought into any of that. Like I'm very big on let's set clear expectations, let's have a contract, let's understand what the assignment is. And then starting my company so young, I think it forced me
to really wrap my head around the fact that people are going to try and take advantage of you, especially if they're the ones giving you the money for the service. Like, there's a huge misconception, and I feel like learned behavior in the generations above me, where people will be like, I'm the one giving you the money, so therefore if I give you any amount of money, I now own you and control you, and I will get everything that I can out of that $10 that I paid you. Instead of saying, hey, you know, encouraging like the younger generations to be like, you're an entrepreneur and you're starting a business and you obviously have value and you know your worth, and I'm going to respect you enough to hear you out as to what skills you have, why you're worth that, and then I'll make an educated decision and a respectful decision on whether or not I'm going to hire you. And at the point that I hire you, we will come to terms of agreement in the contract, understand what both parties are giving, and be completely respectful of one another throughout the entire process. And I just think that that kind of concept is lost on the older generations. And in a lot of ways, or at least I was attracting people who wanted to take advantage of the fact that I was so young and new and needed those referrals. I was dependent on my reputation, and people really used that to kind of weaponize me to get whatever it is that they wanted out of the situation. And it took a lot of growth and maturity on my part to really stand my ground and say, no, that's not how this is going to go. And I base everything off of facts or market stats or whatever it is that's like acceptable and should be what people are basing decisions off of. So I definitely think the obstacle of societal norms will just keep people in general from expressing emotions, and it all boils down to just probably wanting to avoid conflict at the end of the day. And so what can I do that's just going to keep everyone happy, liking me? And that ultimately, though, we've learned is can keep you really stuck, and it can keep you under someone else's thumb or just in dynamics that you ultimately don't feel like you're living your authentic truth.
Yeah, you'll always have this internal frustration that whether you're aware enough to even recognize it or not, but like you said, it manifests in a lot of different ways, and being able to healthily express that leads to like so many good positive things in your life.
Yes. So that brings us straight into the opportunities.
Right.
So we're going to go over real quickly some of the opportunities as to why you would want to learn this, and then make sure that you check out our website, actualizelifestyle.com, or jump on to the YouTube video where we are recording this, and check out the description box to sign up to one of the memberships so that you can get the extended videos to get those tangible resources. Okay, so opportunities. What do you think would be like the first opportunity you see in mastering your emotional intelligence?
The first opportunity I see is just overall better health and well-being.
Yes. Like, because when you're living your authentic truth, like, you're just freer and lighter. Yeah.
And I think too, I know, statistically, people that have higher emotional intelligence have less stress and are healthier.
Better sleep.
Yeah, and it's obvious now once you examine like the obstacles.
Yeah,
and see
that how taxing and how much of a burden and weight that would put on you when you're just bottling all these things up. So yeah, so opportunity number one definitely would be your own personal freedom. And kind of, I view it as I feel a lot better when I'm holding myself to a higher standard of I'm an authentic person and I'm someone who speaks my truth. And if I want that statement to be true every time that I say it, then I better get really, really good and equipped with how I'm going to communicate my feelings to people. Because if I'm going to live authentically, that means I'm speaking my truth 100% of the time, every time that I talk. Yeah. So that's really huge for me. And then my true favorite effort in wanting to learn about emotional intelligence is for opportunity number 2, which is for forming those deeper bonds of people and more meaningful connections.
Yes, that that's like where the good stuff is in this whole process.
Because what is life if you have surface level connections? You know, like, what are we doing here if we're just gonna talk about the weather and have the same, you know, back and forth every time we run into each other? Whereas you can have those 4 or 5 people in your inner circle that you really know that you can be authentically yourself with, and you can tell them when you have a struggle or they crossed a boundary, and you know they're going to want to learn from that and rectify it and move forward. And just all around, I say you can cultivate deeper bonds and relationships.
Yeah, and having deeper, more meaningful relationships is just such like an awesome feeling. And having those people in your corner that you know, like their hopes, their dreams, their like downfalls, and all these things that you've just been open and vulnerable with.
Yeah, and then it feels like you have like those ride or die people.
Yeah, that's so true. I was gonna say ride or die. It kind of reminds me of like how good fences make good neighbors.
Yes, I love that saying. Good fences make good neighbors. It's kind of like, you know, you're gonna like moving into somebody next door that has like a good old fence around their yard, because then like you just know that it's symbolic of somebody having boundaries. And when you find other people that have boundaries, then you know that they're gonna kind of dish out that same respect that they have for themselves for other people. When you live authentically, you become more prepared for doors to open and the right people to come across your path who are going to respect you, because, you know, like will see like, and it's kind of like that other saying of your vibe attracts your tribe.
Yes.
And that couldn't be more true. Like, if you're someone that doesn't have boundaries, then people who like to take advantage of people who don't have any boundaries are going to be the people presented along your path. And everything I've kind of learned is like, God, the universe is going to throw lessons across your path, like, until you learn them. So if you are needing to learn the lesson of creating boundaries and you haven't yet, then you're going to feel like you're living in this like cyclical, like victim type life, where you just are constantly having like issues and problems like thrown at you because you are needing to learn the lesson of setting boundaries. And yeah, we're going to do a whole episode on boundaries, because I think like it can feel really confusing when you are kind of like me, who is naturally a people pleaser. Setting boundaries sometimes can feel like you're being mean, or you're being like too assertive, or you're being harsh, or, you know, it's just a difficult concept to wrap your head around for some people. So we're definitely going to do an episode on that this week. But I think we could go into opportunity number 5, which I know is your favorite one.
Yes. Opportunity number 5 is about always moving forward, because you're not stuck in these like old, like just middle of the road relationships.
Yeah, where just like no one in them is like doing any personal growth. So you're like in the same town that you went to high school, like no offense, but like, you know, it's like that kind of energy. It's like you never leave your hometown, you never make new friends, you never challenge yourself, you never step outside your comfort zone. And some people are super safe and comfortable there, but those are not the people who are listening to this podcast.
That's true.
The people listening to this podcast and watching this YouTube video don't want to be in that environment. So that's why I use that as an example, because when you are so focused on living authentically and speaking your truth, you don't even have to like force that sort of forward trajectory. It just sort of happens on its own, because the only thing you really have to worry about is knowing yourself well enough that you know exactly what it is that you stand for and where you're going and where you want to be. And because you're so sure of that, like, it's not difficult to speak your truth as different challenges arise or obstacles cross your path. And then before you know it, you're like jumping over those hurdles and breaking down those barriers that were keeping you in the same place. And then you're just seeing door after door open, opportunities coming, people crossing your path. And it's just endless momentum forward.
Yeah, positivity and opportunities. And look, I get it. It's like, it's scary to put yourself out there, but it's honestly not as scary as just living in that mediocre middle and like
staying stuck
and like wondering what could have been. Then if you just put yourself out there and you get to experience what there is.
And definitely if you're someone who like has that really deep inner knowing that you're here to do something bigger and you want to accomplish something big. And we want to help you get unstuck and out of your head. So now's our time to jump over to the extended, where we can kind of dive into these tangible resources, go over the components of emotional intelligence and why you want to learn those journal exercises, all the things that Andrew did to expedite his emotional intelligence, learning those and grasping kind of the concepts to better communicate his emotions and express those. I cannot wait. This is where I'm going to thrive, with giving all my little tangible ways that I helped Andrew and what I've kind of learned over the years. So we hope that you'll join us. And if not, then thanks so much for listening today, and we will see you guys in tomorrow's video.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. We'll see you next time.